Hey guys, welcome back to another video in the series where I'm going to show you how to build a full stack music player application. In this video, we're going to build a RESTful API for our songs. Okay, if you remember in the presentation, I gave you a slide here where I showed you all of the API endpoints for our REST API. So it's got the basics. You can get all the songs, you can get a specific song by its ID, you can create a new song, you can update a song by its ID and song data, you can delete a song, everything you'll need to work with songs. So this is what we're gonna be building this episode in our Spring backend. Spring is actually used very commonly for such web services, for RESTful APIs and such stuff like this. So this is a great use case and a great way to practice our Spring skills and build our portfolio. Hey guys, before I get back to the video, I want to tell you something real quick about Brain.fm. Brain.fm is a great product for getting into your zone, whether that be for working or falling asleep, as you just saw me a second ago after listening to some of their music. I'm sure you guys are just like me. I'm a programmer and also I'm a student, so I spend most of my time at my computer pretty much all day working on projects or trying to focus on getting a task done. A lot of the time it can be hard to focus with so many noises in the outside world and Twitter and social media and stuff like that. So it's hard to focus. So Brain.fm is a website and also a company that curates for you music and sound to focus, relax, or fall asleep. They have all types of popular music choices or sound choices like lo-fi if you're trying to focus, or if you're trying to fall asleep in 2 seconds, like I just did, the sound of rain or a thunderstorm or like the beach or a forest or something like that. Really cool. And the other thing that's really cool about Brain.fm is that it actually does help you focus and relax and stuff like that, because there have been studies that have been done that show that it does that. It helps you focus and stuff. So with all that said, if you go to brain.fm/CodySimpson or use code CodySimpson, you can get 20% off on a new subscription. And even cooler, it helps my channel out so I can keep making great content for all of you guys. And also, if you think about it this way, you can watch my videos to learn, turn on Brain.fm to focus, and start coding what you learned. It's both a website and an app, so whenever I'm, at home, I go into the website and I, turn on some lo-fi music or some other focused music, and I work on my projects that I have to work on or my homework. And then when I'm outside, when I'm not home, when I'm at school or something like that, I use their app, and it's made really simple because you can use it wherever you want to go. Again, that's brain.fm/CodySimpson, but I also leave a link in the description below, so make sure to check it out. All right, let's get back to the video. Okay, so let's move this to the other screen here. And what we're going to do here is make a new controller in our controllers package, and we're going to call it song controller. And this time we're not going to annotate it as a controller, we're going to annotate it as a REST controller. So this specifically marks our class here as a RESTful API controller, because we can return by default JSON text in the requests, or the HTTP requests. Because that's the primary, nowadays, the primary data that you're going to be returning in a RESTful API. You're going to make a request to this API, and then it returns to you some JSON text and other information. The API that we're going to build is not going to be fully RESTful. Another element of RESTful APIs is hypermedia, and also like the locations of the resources that you're working with. And I'm not going to show that in this video. We're not going to focus on that. We're just going to focus on the basics of the RESTful API, like how to do certain things, like how to get the songs, update the songs, return the proper data, the proper status codes, and all that. We're not going to do the hypermedia part, so that's the only part that is lacking. But yeah, so it's okay though. This is very, very useful. Anyway, so let's import our dependencies. So private final storage service. So this will be able to. So this will, of course, allow us to upload our songs and all that. Private final song repository. This will give us all of our songs, or allow us to work with the songs in our MongoDB database. So get songs, update songs, etc. And that's all we'll need for our dependencies. And then we can use our constructor here to constructor inject it using Spring. So constructor, boom, and then annotate this as auto-wired. That's not even needed, but you should still have it there. Okay, so now we're going to build the REST API. We're going to actually build the endpoints for our API. So for the mapping of the API, the default, like the root mapping of it is just going to be /API. So we're going to make use request mapping here. And this is how we can specify the root the root, what's it called? Mapping or route, whatever you want to call it, root mapping, whatever. Now, our first endpoint is going to be /songs. It's a GET request, so you can get all of the songs in our repository, our database rather. So we're going to do @GET mapping, and we're going to do public. We're going to return a response entity. This is essentially a special object you can use to specify the HTTP response code and our status code, and also you can put the data in there. So we can use this to easily construct responses in our REST API. And we're going to do get song, or yeah, just get songs. How about that? And then for the data, we're just going to do return response entity. And then you have these options here. You can do OK if the status is just OK, if everything is normal, not found, if what we're looking for is not found, no content. You have all these options here, and there's even other variations. You can do return new response entity. You can just put the data, and you can also specify more information like the headers and all that, the status. But yeah, for basic stuff, we can do return response entity dot OK. And then we can return, inside of OK, you put the body of the response, so aka the data that you're returning. So if we want to return a list of all of our songs, first of all, we can change this from the wildcard to song, a list of songs, import songs, and then we could do song repository.find all, which returns a list of songs, or an empty list if there's no songs. There we go. So what this will do essentially, this little method here, is when you make a GET request to the /API route in our backend here, what it's going to do is get all of the songs from our song repository as a list and construct a new response out of that, an HTTP response with the body of the list of songs. But of course you can't, use Java code with an HTTP response. So that Java code, the Java object of a list of songs, will be automatically translated into JSON. Because commonly when you're working with the web APIs, the easiest way of transferring text data is with JSON. It's a great way of representing data. And that's just one of the many, powerful things provided by Spring REST. REST controllers, they automatically translate to JSON code, or JSON text, which is really cool. And it doesn't have to be just lists; it can be any Java object, generally speaking. Okay, so it's going to return that. And if we want to test this out, what we can do is open Postman. Before we construct the other API endpoints, let's run this to test out this API endpoint here. Now, there's a bunch of different methods and applications you can do use to run HTTP requests and test out your endpoints, but we're going to be using Postman, which is a very, very popular application for doing those things. So all you got to do is enter the request URL, which is essentially the endpoint URL. Ours is just localhost 8080/API, and this is going to be our GET request, so you can specify all of the different types of HTTP requests here: GET, POST, PUT, PATCH, DELETE. Those are the common ones. We're going to do a GET request because that's the one that we just created here. And we're going to change this endpoint actually to /API/songs. Since this entire controller here will be related to songs, it makes sense to have the root route as /API/songs. So if we didn't do that, then we would have to go here to our GET mapping and explicitly type /songs. But we would have to do that for each of our endpoints. They're all going to be using /songs as the root route. So we'll just have it set up here so they all use that one without having to declare it. So let's go ahead and reload the application to use that. Okay, all done. So we're going to open Postman, and we don't need to give any data. So we're just going to do send. So now it's going to make the post request, and it's not found because we have to change this back to songs. There we go. And look at that. We get an empty array here, empty JSON array, because our MongoDB database does not have any songs within it. So we know that the request was made successfully and we got a proper response. It makes sense to have an empty array because we don't have any data. And you can see some other information like the status code that was returned, which is 200 OK. And the reason that is 200 OK specifically is because we did response entity.OK, which makes it so that the response that is sent back is using the HTTP response code of 200. If we were to do something like response entity.notfound, then you would get whatever response code is, proper for that one, okay? But let's continue with making the endpoints. So now we're going to create a GET mapping for a specific entity, a specific song that we want to grab. So we're going to do ID surrounded by curly brackets. And I'll show you how that works in a second. First, let's finish this. So public response entity, and we know that we're going to be returning a song if we find it. Get song is going to be the name of the method, and we want to do path variable string ID. I'll explain that in a second. It's tied to this right here. And so what we want to do is use this ID provided in the request to find a song in our database and then give it back in the response. So we're going to do song repository dot find, and you have all these find methods here, but we can do find by ID. So this will find a song by specific ID that you provide, and it's going to return an optional, and the optional will tell us if it's provided or not. Okay, so find by ID and then provide ID, and we're going to return that into a new optional. So optional song is equal to song repository.find by ID. There. And then we could do if song.isPresent, meaning that if the song is within the optional, meaning it was found, then this will return true. If it's true, then what we can do is do return response entity dot OK, and it's OK because it was found, everything was successful, and then we can just pass in song.get. So we're getting the song object from the optional since it's in there, and returning it into the response as JSON text. It'll be translated into JSON for us. Otherwise, if the song is not found from the database by that ID that is sent in the request, return response entity dot not found. This is what you use when you can't find a thing that you're looking for. And for this one, you have to do build on the end. This will actually give you the response entity object. So response entity dot not found dot build, and this will return the response using the proper not found code, like I said before, instead of just an OK code with the data. So let's see how this looks. So hopefully you know the basics of how to make a REST API using Spring. But so the way that this works up here is that when you go to localhost 8080/API/songs, and then you put a song ID here, this ID here, this what do you call it? Placeholder, I would call it, represents the ID that you will enter. So then you have to create a mapping for it. Path variable, which talks about this, is mapped to a string ID. So the ID is the name of the path variable that you're trying to grab. Or you can explicitly set the name in the annotation right there if you want to. And so what this will do is, hopefully, if it's present, it will grab the ID from the path, and then it'll put it into the string for you to use here. In this case, we're using it to find the song using that ID. So again, this is matching this. These are hooked up together. So when you make a GET request to this here, this string ID variable will be set to this because the ID here will be mapped to this. And the curly brackets is how you tell Spring that this is a path variable. Now let's go to Postman to test this out. So we don't have any songs in our database still, but if we put an ID here, let's see what happens. Since this is not a proper ID, it should give us a not found response. So send, and there we go. We get 404 not found. Okay, that's because we did not restart our application. Got to make sure to do that after making any changes. Okay, there we go. Send. This time we get an empty body, but we do get 404 not found because that is the proper response code, HTTP code for not found, 404. That's very, very common. So this is useful in applications that consume your REST API. For example, our React frontend, we know that if we get a 404 response, that means that our song was not found. So we can do something, we can show something on our frontend like song not found, try again later, or something like that. It depends on, what you're trying to build. And if we get a 200 response with the body, then we know that everything was found, and we can display that on the page. We can use the data. So that's, and then there's different error codes for different uses, of course. This next API endpoint is going to be the endpoint we use to create new songs. And this is going to be actually the most tricky one because we have to also upload the song file from our front end to the back end, our REST API. So the song uploading part is kind of tricky. I had to do a lot of research for this one. So we know that to upload a song, or to create a new song rather, we're going to use a post request. That is the common request mapping for creating new resources. So public response entity song, and we're going to do create song. And the data pass within this is very important. So first we're going to pass in request part song, and I'll explain this in a second. Then the second request part will be the file itself, so request part file, multi-part file, which we saw last episode, but this time we're using it with the REST API, not just a regular controller. What's the problem? Oh yeah, multi-part file, not multi-part. There we go. So then we go back up here, and we need to edit a few things. So we're going to do consumes is equal to multi-part slash form dash data. So this will be the type of data that this API endpoint consumes. In this case, it's multi-part, meaning there's multiple parts. In this case, there's a song part and a file part, form dash data. Now this first part is the actual song data itself. So you're going to have a song JSON object that is, sent with the HTTP request, but it's going to be automatically translated into a song object if it matches, the song model, and hopefully it does. So any request you make that's providing song data should automatically be translated into the song object, and this will be provided in the body of the request, not in the parameters like in a GET request, because this is a post request, so it's better to provide it in the body. And then the second part is the actual file itself. Simple enough, right? It's self-explanatory. That's the file that you upload, okay? Now this is going to be the processing logic of our request. So first we want to see if there is already a song with that file name. Our music archive application can be theoretically holding, hundreds or thousands of songs. So we want to make sure that no duplicate songs are added. It's impossible to check, using our eyes, right? It's very hard to do that. So programmatically, we want to check to see if the song with that file name or with that title is already within the database. So we're going to do if song repository and do exists, but we don't have a method for that, right? We only have exist by ID and exists. We don't have a specific exist method to check to see if a song exists with a specific file name or with a song title. Now there's two different ways we can do this. We can either get every single song in the repository, or the database, and then loop through each one to see if there's one that matches that song name, or we can use our song repository interface here to create a custom method to check to see within the database internally, and this would be faster. You don't want to have to grab every single song every single time you want to check to see if there's already a song in there. So we did this before, so let me show you again how you can do this. First, let's go ahead and make a method that checks to see if there's a song already with a specific file name. So it's going to return a boolean, true or false, and we're going to do exists song by file name. You can do control space file name equals, and then you provide a file name, string file name. So what this will do is the code will be generated at runtime, essentially. What this will do is you provide a file name, and then it'll check to see if a song exists with that file name. Very, very simple, right? And we're going to make another one, boolean exists song by title equals string title. Okay, so now we can use these methods in here even though we have not defined any code for them. Very, very powerful. So song repository dot exists with file name, and then we pass in the how do we get the file name? So the file name is going to be provided by this object here that was translated from the JSON body. So we're going to do song dot get file name, and then we can do or song repository dot exist song by title, song dot get title. There we go. Okay. So if either of those are true, that's why we have an OR here, we want to return response entity dot bad request. And the body will be just a message so you know what kind of problem it is. So we'll say just taken. We can process that however we want to. Of course, on the front end, we can process it by either reading the body and seeing if it has taken within it, or we can process it by reading the response code of bad request. I'm just going to do this one here, I believe. We'll see when we actually make the front end whether we do that, which way we do it, okay? Oh yeah, we can't do that because it's asking for a song in the response entity, not a string. So there's different ways you can get around this. You can either change the response entity body or use something else, or you can just change it to a wildcard. So any type of object will be acceptable for this response, okay? I don't know if that's probably a bad design pattern, but I'm going to do it like that. If you have any better ideas, then please let me know. I'm happy to hear what you guys have in mind. Okay, so then else, if there's not a song with that name already taken, then we're gonna do uploading the file. So the first step will be to use the song service, the storage service rather, to upload the song. We've done this before. So storage service dot upload file. So that will hopefully upload it with luck. Make sure we add exceptions here so we can process those. And then after that, after we upload it, we can do saving the song data into the database. You know, in a real world application where you want to be as detailed as possible, you're probably going to want to check to see if the uploading was successful or not. But in this case, we don't need to be that extensive. We can just, assume that it's going to be uploaded successfully as long as our code is written correctly. So now we're going to take our song that is provided in the request and put it into our database. So we need to make a change here before we continue. Before we take this song here that was provided in the request and put it into the database as a new document, we need to do one thing. We need two things. We need to go up here and change this from song.filename to file.getOriginalFilename, because this song object here does not have the file name. The file name is only present within the file that was uploaded itself. Because technically on the front end, you could grab this file name and then put it into the song object before you upload it. But what we're going to do is just grab it in the back end and then set it into here specifically. And then we're going to go down here to song.setFilename and then use that again. So file.getOriginalFilename. So on the front end, you don't have to worry about setting the song data to use the file name. You don't have to worry about that. You can just upload the general song data like the name, the artist, and and the is it favorited or not. So that will be provided. In this one, we just have to set ourselves on the back end after we upload it. Now to create that song in our database, we can do song inserted song, because this is going to return a new song, and do song repository.insert. Insert and provide a song. So this is going to insert our song data into the database, and it's going to return a new song which represents the completed data. So it's going to have a song object with an ID, because the ID is automatically generated by the MongoDB database. This right here does not have an ID. You can't, know that. Technically, you could put the ID ahead of time. You could generate the ID yourself, but in this case, we're just going to let this do it, and then we'll have it return the song, and then we'll actually just return the song from the request too. So we'll do return new response entity. And there's different ways you can do this. You can do .created and provide the URI location of what you created. And that's like the hypermedia thing I was trying to tell you about earlier. Or we can do response entity and just pass it in as a new, we can do this method here, create a new response entity object, and do the inserted song, which is the body. So inserted song, that'll be translated into JSON. And then we have the HTTP status code. So HTTP status dot, and you have all these status codes here, or all these enums that represent status codes. So we're going to do created. Since we created a new song, the response that represents this works correctly is created. So this will, I think, is that a 202? Something like that. It'll be a 20 something, because positive response codes usually start with a 2. 200 is like the normal OK response code. Anyway, so I'm not going to test this out just because it's hard to create a new song. You could technically upload a file using Postman, but I'm not sure how to do that. All right, so let me recap what's happening here. So you're making a post request to the /API/songs route here, and then you're also providing the song data as JSON text in the body of the request, which is going to be automatically translated on the back end to a song object using Spring. And then you also provide the file itself that you want to upload. So this will be represented as a multi-part file reference. So then what you're going to do is check to see if the database already has a song with that file name or with that title, using the title provided in the song data, as well as the file name provided in the file data. And then if that's present already, then you're going to return a bad request response with the body of taken. Otherwise, if that is not taken already, we're going to upload the song to our storage service DigitalOcean space, and then we're going to set the file name of the song data, the song object, using the file that was uploaded, so file.getOriginalFilename. And then finally, we're going to insert that into our database, our MongoDB database, using the insert method of our repository. And that is going to return a new song object, which has the ID filled out. And then we can return that in the response body, and then the front end or whatever application is consuming this API can use the ID for whatever purpose they need, like either displaying the page or or some other thing that they want to do with it. And this will be a created status code. I can't really test this out. I mean, you can use Postman to test out, you can upload songs with Postman to test this out, but I'm not going to do that. It's kind of tricky. I'm not sure how to do it, to be honest. So we're just going to test this out when we actually make the front-end application. And it should work because I coded this out ahead of time, remember? So this is valid code. On to the next mapping. Now we're going to do a put request mapping for updating your song data. Okay, so public response entity song, response entity song, update song. So this one's going to be, we're going to need two things. We're going to need the ID of the song that we're trying to update, as well as the new data that we're trying to replace on the current song. So the ID will be passed in as we passed it in before, using the ID path variable surrounded by curly brackets. So string, path variable string ID. And to get the song, we need to do request body song data. So the way that the request body works is the same way that it works up here. Even though this one's called request part, this one is actually still passed in by the body. It's just because of the way that we're consuming it, there has to be a request. It has to be passed in using request part annotations because it's multi-part. But here we're explicitly declaring it as using request body. So as you know, hopefully an HTTP request has a body, as well as other things like headers and stuff like that. But also the response has a body, as we saw before. That's how we return it with a body of the song that we got here. So the request body is how you can specify different information like the data that you're trying to retrieve, data that you're trying to save. It can be anything, right? It's just the data that you pass into the request, with the request, So in this case, we're going to be passing it in as JSON data, and the JSON will be translated, if it fits the model of song, into a song object. So let's say that you're trying to do this on Postman. So first you would change this to a put request, since we're doing a put request. And then you have all these different types. If you go to body, you have all these different types of body content types. Because there's different ways you can send the data in the body. There's different content types. Now you can do a file here if you want to. You can also do form data, form URL encoded, GraphQL. But the way we're going to do it, if you wanted to test this, is go to raw and then select JSON. You can do other types too, but JSON here is if you want to pass in JSON text into the request that you're trying to make. And this is the data. So let's say that you're trying to pass in, a JSON object into this, right? Let's say that you want to pass in song data. So the way you would do it is you would do title, and then the title, blah, 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 and then artist is favorited, false, something like that. That's how you can pass in the song data, and this will hopefully be translated into the song object on the back end. So if you wanted to use Postman, this is how you do it. But of course, we're not going to be using Postman when we make the front end. This is only to test it out. We're going to be using a library called Axios to make HTTP requests in our front end application. And then you could also pass in data using request parameters. That's usually used for GET requests, though. You can use this for pull requests and post requests, but usually you want to use the body for that, so the data is more hidden. And it's just how you usually pass data in for those types of requests, okay? Anyways, hopefully that makes a bit of sense, just like sort of like a recap on how that crap works. So we're going to try finding the song first. So optional song optional is equal to song repository dot find by ID. So we're using the ID passed into the path variable to try finding the song. So if the song is available by using is present, then we know we can grab it. So song is equal to song optional dot get. So otherwise, if the song was not found, then we can do what we did before, just return the response entity dot not found dot build. There we go. Okay, and then if it was found, we're getting the song that was found in our database, and we're going to use the new song data that was passed into the request body to replace it inside of here. So if a song, so let's say that in our request body we do not specify an artist. This means that this song object here, the song data object, it will have an artist field, but it'll be null since it's empty. So what we need to do is to if song data dot get title is not equal to null. If it's not equal to null, then we can safely grab it and do song dot set title, song data dot get title. Because if you were to try grabbing the title and this is null, then you'll get a null exception because you can't grab something that is not actually there. Now, something like this you'd probably want to check on the front end before you even send the request. You want to make sure that everything is filled out and that you're passing the data successfully. But just as a safety, we're going to do this on the back end as well as the front end, just so that we can make sure that there's no, holes in our process here, our logic, so that we can make sure that any song data is never set to null or something like that. Okay, so if song data dot get artist, and if you have a better idea for how to do this, then please let me know, but this is just how I figured out how to do it. Happy to hear what you have in mind if you have any ideas. Okay, and then finally song.setFavorited. I think for booleans, since song, if we go to their song model here, is favorite is the last one, that's a boolean. I think a boolean is never going to be null if I'm not mistaken. It'll always be false or true if not specified, I think, but I could be wrong about that. So if I'm wrong about that, please let me know. But I'm just going to do song data without checking it, dot is favorited, and that should grab true or false and set it there. But again, on the front end, you want to make sure that the data is being passed anyway, so that's very important to do. And then song repository dot save. So in this case, we're not using insert because we're not creating a new song. We're just saving the current song that we have. So this song object already has an ID within it, so that ID is going to be used to know which song to update, and then the data is being replaced internally. So finally, after you update it, we'll do return response entity dot OK song, and yeah, there we go. So now this should update your songs in the database and return a response, if it's found or not found, and updated or not updated. And again, we're using a put request for this because that's the common HTTP method for updating resources. The final request that we'll be doing is our delete request. This will be how we delete a song. So delete mapping, public, response entity, song, and delete song is the name of our method. This time we'll also be passing a path variable of string ID so that you can specify the ID of a song that you want to delete. So this means we'll need it here in the path itself. Okay, so we're going to do basically the same thing that we just did. We're going to see if a song exists by the ID. We don't need to grab the song since we're about to delete it. And then if it exists, we're going to delete it. So we're going to do if song repository dot exists by ID, ID, then we want to do song repository dot delete by ID. So we can assume that that worked correctly. So after that, we'll do return response entity. And we don't really have a body for this since, we just deleted a song. So we'll do no content. That's the proper, well, there's of course different ways for everything, but that's how I've seen it for a delete mapping. You usually respond with a no content response. So build, else, and then if the song was not found with the ID, we'll just do the standard not found. There we go. So that's a delete request for our REST API here. Okay, there we go. We finished making our REST API. So now any application that is capable of consuming HTTP APIs can work with this to, talk to our backend to create songs, delete songs, get songs, everything that it needs to do, full CRUD functionality. And this can be, this can be hooked up to a front end for like a website. It can be hooked up to an application, like a phone application. It can be hooked up to a desktop application. It can be hooked up to a toaster, whatever you need. Pretty cool stuff. This is like what REST APIs are all about nowadays. This is a web service that can be hooked up to anything that is able to consume HTTP requests and responses and all that. We are done. We have created all of the endpoints here. Hopefully you found this very informative because sometimes it can be tricky. You're not sure what to do for certain types of requests. And this is a good template you can use in the future if you want to. So you can use the code in the description below to have it as a reference for any future endeavors where you need to create a RESTful API. Like I said, the only thing we did not do is, the hypermedia part of things where you return the URI of the thing, like the songs and all that. But that's for a fully RESTful API. We're not going to worry about all that in this episode or this series. So, because we're not going to need it. But just in terms of the basics for REST APIs, this is getting the job done. It's pretty extensive, I would say. So yeah, hopefully you found this informative and hopefully you liked it. In the next episode, we are going to make our front end. We're going to start building the React application. This will be pretty much the longest part, I believe. This video was pretty long, I think, but the longest part will be building it because we have to design the entire front end and then hook up all the components and consume our REST API. It'll take a long time, so stay tuned for all of that. Hopefully you're excited. Alright, so that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. In the description below, I'll leave a link to the code for this episode so you can check it out. You can bookmark it, come back to it later. If you forget any concepts or you just want to review the concepts I taught in this video, I'll mark everything up with comments so you can come back and read the code without having to rewatch the video, although your reviews are greatly appreciated. So yeah, I'll leave a link for that in the description below, so make sure to check it out. And another thing is I'll leave a link to our Discord server. It's a big community for programmers. You can ask for help on your programming projects if you're stuck on something, or maybe you can get some new friends. If you don't have any friends, there's lots of people here. It's growing really fast. You can find lots of people who are passionate about the same things as you. For example, if you like Minecraft Spigot development, you can find lots of people who like that. If you like C++, if you like Java, if you like web development, it's a really, really big programming community. So feel free to join. There's a link for that in the description below. And the last thing I want to tell you is that if you want to support this channel, you can click the join button below this video and you can join this channel as a member for as low as 99 cents a month, and you can cancel at any time. You get some cool perks like early access to all of my new videos, a cool rank on my Discord server like you see right here on the side, YouTube members, and also you get to see yourself on the screen like you see right now. So if that sounds cool to you, feel free to join. If you don't want to, that's fine. If you can't, that's okay too. I really just appreciate you watching the video anyway. And thank you. Thanks a lot. And that's it. So if you like this video, leave a like. If you want to see more, subscribe. And peace.